So now I'm just going to go through a quick review of the programme. So at 3 weeks, I'm going to repeat the hand grip strength test and also introduce the vertical jump test. This is just so we can monitor how the client's got on so far throughout the 3 weeks and if there's any problems or if any targets need to be changed or in fact any new targets need to be put in place. So at 6 weeks, obviously at the end of the programme, I'm going to repeat the tests again. This is just to allow the client to see if they've achieved, what they've achieved, whether they've actually met their targets or not, or whether they've maybe built on what they achieved at 3 weeks or maybe they haven't. Also, the information or the data received from these tests after at 6 weeks could potentially be compared to normative data if the client wanted to, as well as the tests that were initially performed. So some alternatives. So because the client obviously has back problems, if they find that they are unable to lift some of the weights due to their back issues, then they can use lighter weights or even just substitute in a different exercise that works the same muscles but just only requires them to be working with their own body weight. This is just to prevent potential injury and so that they're getting the best out of the programme. So now for client 2. So doing the physical activity readiness questionnaire with client 2, we received some information that they had suffered from a recent knee injury and therefore were awaiting surgery. Obviously this is going to cause some issues for the programme. So they have fairly low activity levels, as I said, due to the knee injury. They enjoy endurance activities and they have a fairly low resting heart rate, which is good, and they are a healthy weight as well. So any potential barriers to exercise is that they do have family commitments and also their partner has certain days where they are busy, so the client has to, isn't available those days. So there's just many commitments revolving around family. Also work, full-time work, and again, the recent injury. So targets. So the main target for the client is to increase their cardiovascular endurance, improve it. So although they're open to working on elements such as speed and strength as well, so they did mention that they were happy to work on speed and strength, so I have fed that into the programme slightly as well. So they achieved 10.6 on the bleep test, which I'm not going to compare to normative data again. This is until they have completed the test for the second time at the end of the 6 weeks. Most importantly, they'll be comparing their 2 scores against each other. That's the most important thing. Also halfway through the training programme, they're going to complete the Cooper run. So at 3 weeks, they're not going to do the bleep test, they're going to do the Cooper run, which is another test of cardiovascular endurance. And compare this to their score of 2.1 kilometres, which they previously achieved. This will just help to monitor the progress of the client and potentially motivate them to keep to the programme and working hard. So the targets is to get 3 kilometres in the Cooper run and 11.5 on the bleep test. So here we are going to discuss the programme. So I've put in 3 sessions per week because of the fact that they work full-time and have family commitments. Also, for the majority of the sessions, I've stated otherwise where it applies, but for the majority of the sessions, they're going to be working at 60 to 70% of their maximum heart rate. This is because this is just the zone that you should be working at if you want to sort of stay in shape, just lose a bit of weight or whatever. But the 70 to 80% zone, which is what it mainly will shift into, is really targeting the aerobic fitness as well as just staying in shape. So the majority of the programme will be continuous training, but also interval training is being introduced later on in the programme. So week 1, so Monday, before the main session starts, we're just going to do a walk before stretching as well. This is just in order to warm up the muscles, and therefore once they're warm, stretching is going to have more of an effect on the flexibility, which is fairly important in swimming. Swimming was chosen to start, really. As you can see, again, there's another session of swimming on Saturday that's chosen because it's a very low impact sport, which is very important, especially for this client coming back from a knee operation. So stretching on the Monday, stretching the arms, shoulders, like in circular motions, legs. For the calves, you do the wall lean exercise. Back also is another, more muscles in the back, obviously, to stretch. So a slow swim to reduce the pulse for the cool down. Stretching as well, obviously, which is going to stimulate the muscle receptors, which promote relaxation, as well as the removal of any possible waste products. So the rest sessions, I've put in knee strengthening exercises to be performed as well. So straight leg raises to begin with, easy, just lay on your back and raise your legs. Later in the program, when the knee is slightly stronger, a wall sit can be introduced, as it's slightly more of an advanced position to be holding, especially after a knee injury. So on the Wednesday, just before the session in the warm-up, make sure you're stretching gastrocnemius, hamstring, quadriceps, hip flexors as well, all those leg muscles, and then obviously the cycle, and then the cool down, stretching the same muscles. And then on the Saturday, it's just the same session as the Monday, just the same swim, the same muscles to be stretched, and the same warm-up. So week 2, so on the Monday, it's the same session as the previous week again, but I've increased the swimming time just by 5 minutes. Also, I've done a 1 minute rest about halfway through the swim, just to break it up so it's not 20 minutes of continuous exercise. That may get a bit boring for the client, so just breaking it up a little bit, having a bit of a break. Obviously, swimming is quite a good one as well because there's various strokes that you can do, so that will prevent boredom as well. So on Wednesday, a slightly different session. So stretching triceps and biceps brachii, deltoids, trapezius. Downward dog, the yoga pose, is very good, and spinal rotation, very good both to stretch the core muscles because there's a few core workouts in there. So core and arm exercises are being introduced as the client was open to working on strength, as I said. This is just helping to maintain a good physique. So plank is going to start at 1 minute and it's going to increase by 10 seconds for every repeat. This is just to achieve overload to really work the muscles. Now, because this is a slightly different session and it's working more as like maximal activity, the client's going to be working at 90 to 100% of their maximum heart rate so that they're really focusing on building the muscle and toning their muscle. So the cool down could do some yoga poses like the ones I mentioned before, downward dog, and also child's pose, which is just when you're on your knees, you put your hand, and then another one where you're on your knees, you put your hands behind you on the floor, flat behind you, and push your stomach out as far as possible, lifting the buttocks off of your heels. This is just really to stretch the core and make sure that that's not iffy for the next session. So on the Saturday, for the warm-up, make sure you're stretching the legs, gastrocnemius, hamstring, quadriceps. A slow cycle after the main session, just to lower the pulse and then cool down the same muscles as before to prevent DOMS, which I will discuss at the end. So on the Monday of week 3, it's just the regular swimming session. However, I have increased the time that the client will be swimming for again. So before making sure all the stretches are done, and afterwards as well, is still important to stretch. Now in week 3, I feel like it's a good time, if the client obviously feels like they're ready, it's a good time to start performing the wall sits, as the knee will be fairly stronger now, starting at 30 seconds and then maybe increasing by 10 seconds every time the exercise is performed, just performing that a few times, obviously leaving plenty of space between because you don't want to overdo it, and it's also very difficult on the legs, that warm-up, that exercise as well. So on the Wednesday, warming up the leg muscles ready for the cycle, so same thing, gastrocnemius, hip flexors as well, hamstrings and quadriceps. So I've changed this session up a little bit. It's going to be more of focusing on interval training. So as it says there, we'll just start with your average cycle, 70 to 80% of your maximum heart rate for 5 minutes. Then a 1 minute, it's quite a long time, but a 1 minute sprint for as fast as you can really for the minute at 90 to 100% of the maximum heart rate. Then just take it down to 60% for 2 minutes, just to rest and recover before increasing the intensity and repeating the process. Then obviously this one, it's really important to cool down because it's going to be a very difficult session, especially with the sprints. So making sure that the muscles are ready for the next session and removing any lactic acid that's built up, because it will be up because the lactic acid system is going to have been recruited. So on the Saturday, I've introduced the first running session. This is just purely because I've allowed time for the knee operation recovery, really, because swimming before, which is very low impact, whereas running is fairly impact exercise. Same as make sure the leg muscles are being stretched before and after. Gastrocnemius hamstring, do the hamstring sweeps. Quadriceps, bear hugs, where you just lift your bend your leg and lift it up towards you, holding it in as tight as you can. So into week 4 now, Monday, making sure to stretch the leg muscles before the continuous workout. So it's the same interval session as previously, but it's being done as a run instead. So that's why the sprint is slightly shorter. The duration the duration that you're running for has increased as well, though, since last week. Making sure to cool down after that session as well, the same stretches as always. Gentle walk as well. So Wednesday, stretching the triceps and biceps brachii, deltoids and trapezius as always. Downward dog and spinal rotation to stretch the core muscles as well. So increased starting point from the plank to 1.5 minutes, just to really, it's increasing, achieving overload. Increase for 10 seconds for every repeat. The cool down, yoga to stretch the core, same as before. Also slightly shorter rest time in between exercises, which is just helping to achieve overload as well. Saturday for the warm-up, stretching the legs. As always before the continuous session, the duration for which they're going to be cycling has been increased. There's going to be 30-second rest halfway through. I feel like I might add a few more rests just to break it up even more, because otherwise it will get fairly boring for the client. Although for this continuous training, the intensity is going to be increased to 70 to 80% of their maximum heart rate. This is just in order to shift the focus really onto their aerobic fitness levels now.